Hello, thank you all for your questions, and I'll try my hardest to answer them as best as I can. So I'll just start with a brief bit about myself. So I used to be a social worker in the frontline children's team. So I worked with children on child in need and child protection plans. So they're children who we believe are experiencing significant harm or at risk of experiencing significant harm, or children who we feel would not meet what is expected of them without our intervention. I now work as a functional family therapist, so that's a specific type of therapy who work with children who are open to social care teams. So these children and young people between the ages of 10 and 17 who have certain referral criteria. So it's children who tend to be verbally aggressive or physically aggressive towards other members in the family home, at risk of absconding, engage in substance misuse, and there's a list of behaviours that we work with. Mainly, the main purpose of that intervention is to prevent children from going into care. So we work to support families to reduce that risk. So the first question I've got is, what made you go into your profession? So I'd done my degree in psychology, and after that I knew that I really wanted to work with people. But at that point I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. But I know I want to have sort of a hands-on job working with people on a day-to-day basis. I came across a graduate trainee scheme that Suffolk do, where they fund for you to do a master's in social work. So I applied for that scheme and got onto that, and that's how I then got into the social work career. And then I saw the advert for my current job as a functional family therapist, and it was quite therapeutic, which I liked. So I applied for it and of course got that job, and that's why I'm working there now. The next question I have is, what's the worst case I have seen? It's really difficult to sort of list cases in terms of sort of the worst case scenario order. I've seen some difficult things, especially as being a social worker. We deal with a lot of neglect cases, substance misuse, sexual abuse. So they are quite difficult cases, but like I say, it's difficult to say what the worst one is as such. But I think cases where children have experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of neglect, and ones where they've been harmed or impacted their development, they're really quite difficult cases because you see how that's going to impact that young person for the rest of their lives. I'm not sure about the next question. It's worded, if the answer for the current question is a harsh one, would you still tell them or would you find another way? I'm guessing that relates to telling families sort of difficult news or something quite critical. If that's the case, then my answer to that is, yep, I'd tell the family. And I think as a social worker or any of those similar type roles, you have to get really used to telling family members difficult information. But transparency is really important in the line of social work. So being open and honest with families go a long way. From family feedback, they will say they really didn't like it when their social worker was dishonest towards them, or they didn't know that was coming. So having those difficult conversations, although it sounds hard, it's really good in terms of building that relationship, because you can be transparent with the family, they know where you're coming from, rather than not being honest with them and then later down the line then find out being critical, or you're going to court to remove their children. It's always best from the offset just to have those open conversations. And you haven't got to be mean about it. It's about taking the right approach and helping them to see it from a wider perspective. So the next question I've got is, what sort of situations do you deal with? What ideas do you have to help to support different service users and techniques? So like I said, I've worked with a wide range of family situations. So families who have lost family members, families who have experienced sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect cases, parental substance misuse. In my current role, I obviously deal with a lot of young people who can be aggressive towards family members in their home, mental health difficulties, and you have to be adaptable. In my current role, what we try to do as a technique is really trying to reduce that blame and negativity in a family. We use things called I statements, which might be worth sort of looking up if you're interested, where it's about communication skills and how you can effectively communicate with someone their feelings without blaming them. So it's a technique we often use. And we're really solution focused and strengths based across my social work role and my current role. It's all about helping families see their strengths and how those strengths can help them move forward. We really want to empower the people we work with, rather than doing a lot of doing for them. So yeah, it's about helping those family members really identify their strengths and how they can help them move forward. As an intervention, as a service, we don't remain in people's lives forever, so it's about giving them tools to help equip themselves. The next question is, do you find it challenging and stressful working in COVID? COVID's obviously been a really strange time for everybody. In my role as a social worker, I was still visiting my high risk case families, of course, in PPE, and keeping a distance. I've done the same in my current role to the most recent lockdown, so now I'm all virtual. I don't know if I find it stressful, but it is difficult because I like to physically see my families, I like to build that rapport, build that relationship, and it's difficult to do that online, especially when you're meeting families for the first time. So I really miss that face-to-face interaction and going out to see families. And of course, in a social work field, risk is what we manage and what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So in COVID, there's that concern that if we're not going out as much as we are, if the children are not going to school as frequently as they were going, it's a lot of risk we're having to manage, and a lot of concern and a lot of unknown harm that may go amiss. So it's quite difficult emotionally having to think about what we're missing due to COVID. The next question is, can you name a time that makes your job hard and how did you overcome it? I think one of the difficult memories which stick to me as a social worker was I had a case where the children were removed and placed into foster care. So at the time of applying to the court, I obviously had to inform parents of our plans and our recommendations. Unfortunately, the mum was quite difficult to get hold of. The children were living with other family members at the time. And I'd seen mum out of contact with the children day before Christmas Eve, I believe it was. And I had to tell her that day that we were going to make an application to court to have our children in long-term foster care. That's a really difficult thing to do, especially because it's Christmas. Mum wanted to spend time with her children. She didn't want that concern. But it's something I had to do because I know that if I didn't do it then, I probably might not have spoken to her for another few weeks, another few months. And she obviously deserved to know what our plan was as a local authority. So that was really tough.